Chandra and Rahul Datta. Ladies and gentlemen, taaliyan basti rehni chahiye for our amazing panelists today. The discussion is Design Technology Innovation, a merger to intensify design for defense. And that's Gokhale sir. A warm welcome. Just to let the panelists know that the crowd will be trickling in. Lunch is always an extended thing, and our team is trying to usher students in, so please do bear with the disturbance. They will be trickling in during the panel discussion. I'll start right away with the felicitation process. I request Tarun Vasu to kindly felicitate Amit Gulati sir with a stole and a veena. Taruna Vasuji. Ladies and gentlemen, let's applaud. I'm so sorry. I request Dr. Sharmila Sinha to felicitate Professor Dheeraj Kumar with a stole and a veena. Thank you, Dr. Sinha. I request Rahul Bhattacharya to felicitate Satish Gokhale sir with a stole and a veena. Rahul sir, ladies and gentlemen. I request Ashish Nar to kindly felicitate Dr. Sushil Chandra with a stole and a veena. And I request Shri Saurav Kumar to felicitate Rahul Datta ji with a stole and a veena. And just, I think because she's one of our own, we need to felicitate her with a huge round of applause. Lolita ma'am. Who's going to be moderating the session. It's been very rare to see women on the panel and on the stage this time, so it's over to you, Lolita ma'am. We'll get the mics. Team ADW, can we have 4-5 mics, please? Cordless, ADW. You want to maybe just start the introduction from there till we make sure we have enough mics, and we have to keep some in the audience as well. So thank you so much, Lolita ma'am.
Very good afternoon to all of you. And we're almost coming to the close of ADW. And it's been an honor to have been present for many of the sessions in the past 2 days. And today we're going to have our last panel discussion and session, which talks about defense, design, and merging technologies. In the past few days, you would have heard a lot about defense, some things that none of us even knew anything about. And we've, of course, heard and seen some very interesting work of designers. Even this morning, we saw some. And now I'm going to introduce to you a very interesting panel, which comprises mainly of designers, design educators, and a very eminent scientist in the DRDO, who is my first panelist, Dr. Sushil Chandra. And he's been a scientist in the Defense Research and Development Organization, which is DRDO. And I just asked him how long he's been there, and he said over 35 years. So I think that says a lot. I will ask him to introduce himself at a later stage, unless he has a mic. So, Dr. Chandra, if you'd like to just shed some light on your... Yes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I'm really thankful of the organizer, and it was really wonderful experience being in this university first time. I am actually an electronics engineer, converted into a biomedical engineer, and now latest converted into a cognitive scientist. And in one liner, one more thing, I think design and cognition go hand in hand, always. That's it.
Thank you. My next panelist, who you've already heard, who's also, I think, a very well-known designer and almost a contemporary of mine from the National Institute of Design, Satish Gokhale. And something that probably nobody sort of announced or even knew about was that 2 days ago, Satish, if I'm wrong, please correct me, Satish was awarded the Lexus Design Prize for product design. So let's have it for him, please. Thank you. And I'll just ask Satish to, I think, once again introduce himself with 2.5 words.
2.5?
Words.
So firstly, I think the speakers can't actually hear what
Yeah,
she's speaking.
true,
So
true.
somebody has to take notice and before the next conference, put a speaker here as well. Okay, 2.5 words. I'm an industrial designer. These were 3. But we design, as I said earlier, we design products to save someone's life. That's medical products. We've designed products to take someone's life. We've actually completed carbines and revolvers. And we actually design products where the user has a smile on his face while using it.
Thank you, Satish. I would like to introduce now Professor Dheeraj Kumar, who is the director from NIT Bhopal. He's also an educationist as well as being a professional. So, Dr. Dheeraj, if you could just speak a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Lolita, and my fellow panelists. I think I really don't require any further introduction because I think she's done it. But yes, I have been in design space for like last 25 years, and mostly, initially, situationally, I was in spaces where I had to found things. So, right from my first job till now, I have been founding. So, that is the experience that I have. And secondly, I look at myself today as academic administrator and somebody who understands the creative side of it. So today, probably I will try to make contributions from that experience. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like now to introduce Amit Krishnan Gulati. Amit is also a very well-known, award-winning industrial designer. He's an entrepreneur, he's an educator. He also has his own design studio. He also happens to be on the panel of ADI, if I'm not mistaken, Amit, right? The Association of Designers India. So, Amit, just a couple of sentences about your
Thank you, Lolita, and thank you to the organizers for getting me here. And I must say it was a very well organized and streamlined process to come here and pleasantly surprised to be in this great university. I also had the chance to meet one of my gurus, Professor J. Panchal here, which was a very pleasant surprise. And I believe that if you are a good designer, you don't grow old. And I think Jap is bearing testimony to that. I think his mind is sharper than most of ours. And I think the highlight of today was to interact with him. So thank you. I think
Let's have a round of applause for Jap sir, please. Thank you. Our last panelist is Rahul Datta, and he's also been very involved with emerging technologies, very pertinent to the youth and youngsters of today in AR, VR, the Metaverse, and so on and so forth. So I hope we are going to have an engaging discussion, which is little bit of design, little bit of defense, and a little bit of where we are going in the future, even in terms of education. So thank you, and let's get started.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Like Amit said, pleasure to be here. A very well organized event. Incredible pleasure to meet Jap. You know, I think we're meeting after like about 20, 25 years. And the recognition was instantaneous. I mean, thank you, sir. I mean, he's been a huge part of most of our lives in NID. I've been an emergent technology designer since, I think, 1997. So that's around when I got into virtual reality and metaverses and stuff, when nobody had ever really heard about them. And that fascination has kind of continued through the years. And a lot of the work that we guys do involves, you know, how to use all these fantastic new technologies to bring about a better experience for people, whether it's a better life experience, whether it's a better work experience, things like that. Yeah. So pleasure to be here, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rahul, and we are ready to start. So I'm going to ask my first question to Dr. Sushil Chandra, and this is going to be a sort of fluid, engaging kind of dialogue and discussion. It's not some kind of very structured kind of thing. So let's hope we can keep it that way. So Dr. Chandra, I'd like to really ask you to shed a little light on the area of work that you do, which is your main area of focus, and how it may connect to design in the AR, VR region that you're talking about. Also this thing about physiological, you know, that has really fascinated me in the bio that I've been reading. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and enlighten our audience here today.
Thank you. In fact, as I said in the last, that I'm working into the field of cognition. Let me share the reason how I connected. The way we think, we design. And the way we design, we think. I'll give you the simpler example. One of my paper is Society of Neuroscience and Architecture. That means the kinds of an architecture in which you are staying, you start thinking that way. Or vice versa. Meaning is that the way you think, you will design the architecture. So that's how the story goes. And as far as my work or my team's work is mainly related to cognition in defense. So that means in case of adverse situations, the cognitive declines takes place. So how we should design our, as Rahul said, using technology, UX, UI, user experience in such a way based on virtual reality and augmented reality to train the brain in such a way so that in case of adverse situations, our cognitive declines does not take place, or rather cognitive enhancements can take place. So that means we are not supposed to underperform, rather better perform. So that way I've been working on both the sides using holistic. Holistic means we are using music, meditation, Other things also to improve the creativity or innovation of the brain, as well as technology. So we started our journey from video games, that even 2D video games, single player, then 2D video games, multiplayer, then 3D video games, single player and multiplayer. And then we graduated towards virtual reality, augmented reality, and now mixed reality, which is giving the wonderful experience. And the way technology is growing, actually seamless interaction. As I was discussing with Rahul in the car, I don't know how much he will talk in detail in Metaverse, but I will use only one word: Metaverse for defense will be a highly wonderful things in times to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Sushilji. I'm going to continue to ask this question to Rahul as we continue, and since it's in the same line and vein of thought. And Rahul, since you are also in this domain and you've also been looking at the AR, VR domain, can you explain a little more about what Sushilji just said, and take it maybe also through a little creative line? Because
So just for people who are not like aware of what the metaverse is, I mean, it's just become like a huge buzzword this year, and I'm delighted about that because I've been doing it since around, I think, 2006. I've been a metaverse developer, and every year I'm just like, yeah, this is the year it's actually going to take off. And when it actually took off, it took me completely by surprise. A metaverse is a created universe. It's basically a replica of the actual world, which is digital, where people sort of meet each other as avatars of themselves or digital representations of themselves. And they can do pretty much anything they can in the real world, they can do inside the metaverse. Right? So you can take things like training, with other people. You can take things like co-working. You can take things like pretty much any task that you can do inside a normal work environment or a normal play environment. You can also do inside a metaverse. So this whole thing of remote collaboration, this whole thing of remote discovery, the whole thing of this gigantic simultaneous presence, where you're actually having hundreds and thousands of people doing, things together, does have some very interesting possibilities, like Dr. Chandra said, in the defense sector. We're also exploring ways people can work with each other from wherever they are, inside that created space. We're also exploring ways to create spaces that are specific for very, very, for different applications, right? So if you want a training simulator where, people are, or say a design simulator where people are designing, say, a satellite together, and all of them are in different places, they can all stand inside the virtual space and talk to each other like they were in the real thing, but have a beautiful hologram, a detailed sort of replica of the thing that they're designing in front of them, so that there's some point of discussion that happens. So metaverses are very good for collaboration in that sense. And definitely, there are like some amazing sort of implications that are there, both in the defense sector, in the aerospace sector, and others.
Thank you, Rahul. My next question goes to Amit. Now we are going to jump a little bit. So Amit just told me, and this is for all of you young students back there, that he did his graduation project with DRDO, right? So, and he's really come a long way since then, and he does some really exciting work now. So I'm going to ask him to talk a little bit about his projects, his ethics on design, and how he is where he is today.
Thank you. So it's a slightly longish question, but I hope I can give a compact answer for that. I think I'll go back in time. I think NID in the mid-90s was trying to explore new sectors, railways, and defense came up as one of them. And at that point in time, the Defense Ministry had a team which was incidentally led by Dr. Abdul Kalam. He was heading the DRDO those days. And another very well-known scientist, Dr. Santhanam. And their whole vision was to bring in a lot of minds from outside the institution of the DRDO and invigorate the thought process. And I think it was quite far-sighted of them. This was the same team that did the nuclear bomb explosion, and they were working, cloak and dagger in a lot of technologies, because a lot of technologies were not available readily those days, and India had to reinvent a lot of things from scratch. But coming back to the context of a student of design working in that scenario, what really took me by surprise was that they were more accessible, more open-minded than anything I'd seen in the corporate world. They didn't mind this, 21-year-old, 22-year-old walking through South Block, going from room to room collecting information, because when you do design, you have to start collecting information first. So they understood the design process. They made it very accessible. They made it fun. They were cracking jokes all the time, both of them. And I really was quite fortunate to, be a little fly on the wall while these great minds did their stuff. And I think that also gave me a perspective that you have to have people from all backgrounds to really do anything innovative. And, no matter how experienced you are, no matter how illustrious you are, no matter how high up you are in any kind of hierarchy, you still have to be willing to open your doors to talent, no matter where they came from. And I think what I also learned from that experience was that experience can be the same thing repeated into n number of years, and that doesn't take you very far. But every year, if you put yourself out of your comfort zone, do something new, go to a new place, travel, meet new people, that's what's going to really challenge you and open your mind to possibilities. And for me, even today, I think I try and spend at least 15 to 20% of my time being with students. Very often students of design, but equally students of policy, students of management, and students of architecture, because they are the ones who ask me the most interesting questions, the questions that my past experience cannot answer, and then it opens new ways of exploring the world. So I think that's something that everybody has to invest in year after year, that you're constantly with people who will challenge your presumptions and take you into new directions. And that's the only way you can do design, to be constantly challenged. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. And I think that transitions very beautifully into what I'm going to ask Professor Dheeraj over here. And I think Amit said a very pertinent thing right now about how there has to be, I think, collaboration between industry and education. And that's exactly my question to Dr. Dheeraj, who is also an educator. He says he's also an administrator now. I hope that doesn't mean that you're not an educator anymore. So I'm going to ask you to elaborate on the role of how education can sort of be the trajectory to change in the near future for design students and students wanting to go into the newer areas that we're talking about, design, whether it's the AR, VR, whether it's the anything else which is related to newer things. In this case, there's also defense design, which we are launching here. So can you please elaborate a little bit on that?
So thank you. I think it's a very interesting question, because that is something at a very foundational level, whenever we try to develop an educational program, we try to consider. When I was coming for this particular conference, so I was just wondering one thing, design and defense, though they begin with D, but they are poles apart. Because design talks about making or creating life expectancy or creating experiences and all that, where fundamental premise of defense is to destruct. So there are two odd worlds. One is very regimental, another is very fluid. Design works in a very open environment where you really don't have a lot of prescription happening. You don't have prescribed way of looking at doing things in a one particular manner. So shaking the status quo is something which is very, very important. But whereas when we look at defense, it's totally opposite. So how these two fields really can come together? And secondly, I think another dimension is that the world at this speed, it is changing. That is another, very huge paradigm shift which has happened recently. So one of the catalysts has been this pandemic, and second, I think, is this ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. So what kind of changes it will bring? So, for example, if I try to, correlate with one thing. So, when we talk about cyberspace, we are talking about something which is totally intangible, which doesn't exist as a space. So, how do you, design things for something like that? How do you assess a threat and design to make it consider? So, for example, right now, when we are looking at a physical war, probably I think this conflict between Russia and Ukraine will be the last physical war, and many wars will be fought which are going to be more digital in nature. There was a very interesting movie some time back by Steven Spielberg, Ready Player One. So in that, they had something called a power-absorbing Autobot, persona. So the role of that Autobot was that it will absorb the, whatever earnings of other players. So one of the player loses everything. So, in real life, he throws all the, wearable devices and then he tries to commit suicide. So I think that is somewhere where I really feel design should, kind of make a huge pitch to look at that. How can you still maintain this difference between the real and the virtual world? Because it appears very soon it will be very difficult for a mind, a human mind, to differentiate between them. So design education definitely should be modeled towards a lot of those softer aspects, because I think naturally we are very good at that. So somewhere we have to perceive how the future is unfolding. So that is one thing, how we are learning from that, unseen, ungiven situation to us. So design education totally prepares the student for that. So yeah, I think that is something which I feel we should be looking at, and building resources for that, whether it is faculties, whether it is physical resources like libraries and all that, what kind of, books and collections or, archives you will have, so that people have an idea about how the future is going to be. So I think that is what I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I think we need to understand, I think Dr. Dheeraj mentioned two very critical words, real and virtual. Now, fortunately, unfortunately, we all live in the real world. We are all having chai at the dhaba and having your little sutta at the lalji and here and there and whatever it is. That is the real world. As people, we live in the real world. But we work in very different virtual spaces, but we come back to the real world because that's where we are. Satish, I feel, has been a designer for the real world. And he's had over 3 decades of experience in the real world, product design, industrial design. I think even your company is into branding, graphic design. So Satish, I'm going to ask you to elaborate, to talk a little bit about how you envision the role of design for the upcoming generation.
Difficult question, but I think it can be sorted out. So, on a lighter note, I think the first and foremost, as a designer, I would say you all have to practice to be a devil's advocate. So whether it's in virtual world or real world, you are going to face problems. So you have to emphasize what problems are going to come. Okay, let's take a difference between a civilian life versus a Colonel Bose's past, the army life. What is the difference? Can anybody just guess? So we're talking virtual and real, both. Okay. It's very simple. In army, you see the enemy, you are trained to shoot him. And in civilian life, you and me all, we don't know who our enemy is. So, you have to predict who your enemy can be. So identifying problems, identifying your enemy is a very important thing. So problem, I would say, is an enemy. So whether it's real or virtual world, a problem is an enemy. So, unlike see the, enemy thok do. Here, again I'm saying you don't know who enemy is. So you have to predict what can go wrong in your product, who could actually put spokes in your project. Yeah, and even in virtual world, you have to really live the real world is what I would say. Because touch and feel is so important. So when you're talking about virtual world, you'll have consoles. So even the touch and feel of consoles or your remotes is very, very important.
Thank you, Satish. I think, yeah, I'm going to now ask Amit back to explain about. Amit, we are talking here about a merger of technology, design, thought, concept. These are words I think we hear as students, we hear as professionals, and we continue to hear these in many ways. And we talk about collaborations, we talk about mergers. What, in your opinion, do you think this merger and collaboration can be for design, technology, and the future?
Thanks. So I think, how we really frame it is that as we have started working over time, we found that the silos that we create within an educational or an academic environment, which is probably a distinction. You can't hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah. So what I was saying is, over the years, as we've practicing design of different sorts, the silos that we've created within an academic environment, we kind of divide it into architecture, different kinds of design, industrial design, graphic design, media, and so on. These are more silos of convenience, which have been done to maybe take people through different streams. And probably it's a hangover of our own schooling system where you try and box people into a pathway and say, okay, that's where you're going to reach. So the trajectory is in a way predetermined, like a guided missile. It has to know where the trajectory is. But to again use an example from defense, now the enemy is uncertain and the enemy is very agile, and you have to have something that follows the enemy or detects the enemy before you know it. So, to use the same analogy, the world is not blocked in those silos. When you are practicing design, your clients have needs, they have problems which designers of course see as opportunities, and to solve those needs, you may have to use a very wide swath of design tools, design techniques, and a very wide swath of talent, which may come from engineering, it may come from media, it may come from research, it may come from sociology, it may come from anthropology. These are the sort of skills that you need to solve those problems for people in the real world. And therefore, in education itself, design education itself, that readiness to involve these vastly different, thought processes is very important. You have to be open to doing that. There has been criticism of design that though it's supposed to be collaborative, we aren't often trained to share, we aren't often trained to work in teams very well. Because we have this misconception that it's an individual pursuit. Creativity is one genius trying to, resolve the situation. But really in the real world, it's a team sport. Your client, the designer, everybody has to work in that, sort of collective manner. You have to help each other succeed. And to do that, you need all those, very vastly different skills. And I think as we have understood that, the outcomes have been a lot better. And I think now we actually actively seek those collaborations so that the work that we do becomes more vibrant, it becomes more diverse, and it constantly allows us to grow as people. And then it also starts signaling that you're welcoming all these different people into the domain. And that's when design will truly be a part of society, when everybody sees it as a part of the fabric of living and solving things together.
Yes, Amit, I think that made a lot of sense, and I think we do need to understand some of these very, very relevant to people who are in the design field, who are aiming, who are going to go into the future of design. So I think, you know, it's a not a wake-up call, but it's a call in a manner of speaking. I'm now going to ask Dr. Chandra, because I think, as I said, he does have a really interesting background, and I think we'd really like to know a little more about what he does. So, Dr. Chandra, you are really involved with very high-end technology, and that also for the defense, of course. What are the challenges that you face in this domain of work? What has been, what are the good things, and what have been the difficult things that have come into your pathway?
If I talk about the challenges, mainly as I introduced myself, is working multiple discipline people together. And I'm blessed that way. Like, as I think Amit also said it, I will also say that. My major strength has been the students. But they have been from robotics, they have been from design, they have been from clinical psychology or psychiatry, or they have been from artificial intelligence and working together in a team. So I claim it, I'm blessed with that kind of a team, number one. Number two, I was thinking, if I'm allowed, I'll share about the other people's one. I was reading a paper, being a scientist, I'll definitely quote few papers. Approximately 13 or 14 years before, I was reading a paper and by a philosopher. And he had clearly told that time itself, the time is going to come when we will forget the difference between physical world and virtual world. And everything has got both the sides, positive and negative. I will say two positive aspects of it. The defense itself and sports is another example. By the virtual world itself, you can train the brain in such a way, or let me use a negative word, you can dose your brain to train your brain so that once you face the real situations, you are able to overcome them. Now, coming to the last line, because I know other people also have wonderful inputs which have much more important than me. I'll connect one more field. I'm sure most of you must have heard about neuromarketing. If you design a product and then how it is leaving an impact on your brain so that you are compelling somebody, that means your client or grahak, to purchase that product. I'll give you an example related to if you're designing an ad. And suppose, let me give an example. For example, that ad is for cream, in which Aishwarya is taken for making that ad, whether the person is seeing that cream or Aishwarya. So whole kinds of eye tracking mechanism and neuromechanism. You can actually track your design, ad design, and you can clearly know that whether it will actually leave an impact. I have given you an example of ad. Ad also, whether it is in print media or in a hoarding media or in a TV media, this is one. But the same way it has got, whether it is a circular in shape or a rectangle in shape or it's a bigger design or a smaller design, all leaves a correct impact on your brain, which, not to claim because I'm with DRDO, we have one of the best lab in the country, barring any institution. And there also, you can work on distributed cognition. Again, I'm going in his word, metaverse means if one single virtual environment, if four people, let me say enemy as well as friends fighting together, at that time, he is using his brain resources very less to fight with me while I'm exhausting my brain. So all these things are giving wonderful outcome, merging technology, metaverse, design, and institution together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sushil. Well, I have a question actually for all the three panelists here on my left. And, well, I can jump to Rahul, or I think Satish may tie up better with what you just spoke about, and then I'll go to Rahul. And then we're going to end with Dr. Dheeraj here. So Satish, I'm going to ask you a very cliched kind of a question, and for which I'm sure we all have answers, but I'm going to ask you to give that answer. And that is, where is design going to make the difference?
You want a cliched answer?
No.
I
I want
think
an honest sort of an answer which we can...
design is practically everywhere. So there's just no option but not to design. You know, it's important. Whatever you touch and feel is design. You know, I've been constantly seeing she's looking at me constantly, now. So, it's actually telling me I should wear my mask. But, yeah, I think we have to live design. There is just no option at all. So whatever we do, and more importantly, I think if you see the future of design, I think it's time we question the prior art. Because gone are the days, this had to be done this way. Metaverse is coming, virtual reality is coming. I think things are going to change for sure. So one is, even in basic engineering, I would say, IC engines are going. They're going to be dead with all the EVs coming in. So we have to look saying that, okay, what is going to happen a year from now and what is going to happen 10 years and 30 years from now. So design, actually, you have to start thinking much ahead. In our company, we are actually designing a product to launch in 2035. The work has started right now. So that is a kind of, you have to train yourself to think 3 times ahead now. But design is there everywhere now. So.
It's also in the detailing and the whole, the way we sort of perceive things also. And we are looking at so many things that are happening to us in the future, staring at us in our faces. And I think the pandemic taught us a lot of things. I mean, who would have thought that Swiggy and Zomato would become a lifeline, and so on and so forth. And I think the youngsters rely constantly on apps to do so many things, from ordering food, to calling a cab, to getting their medicines, to buying their online dark glasses or whatever it is. So there is this constant thing for change. Now I'm going to shift to something which is a little different, and then I'm going to come back to Dheerajji. Rahul, I'm told and I hear that you're also an artist. And so I'd like to ask you, how do you think your art or your artistic side of you has helped in making you what you are and helps you do what you do?
Well, I wouldn't really call myself an artist in the conventional sense of the word. I sketch because I love sketching. I paint because I really, really like the feeling of doing it, right? I should also add that, I find that we're in such a beautiful place right now where, technology can actually sort of complement art in a very, very lovely way. Very few people realize this, that, man, where we guys like 15 years ago when we were graduating design college and stuff, we had to write a letter to a manufacturer, for instance, like with snail mail, to actually get information from them. Today, all that information and a lot more is just at your fingertips. You can Google anything you want, right? So for me especially, what happens is that technology and virtual reality, all the stuff that I do that's more rigid and organized, art sort of gives that little flavor of, it gives it movement, it gives it that sense of aesthetic, it gives it that sense of fun, it gives it that sense of doing stuff. I don't know, like, for me, the thing is that I like to consider myself a bridge between art, design, and technology.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think,
really is.
I'm sure a lot of us, Amit, do you draw?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, that fun has to be there.
In fact, I hardly do any creative work on the computer. I mean, you'll be surprised to learn that. And I do everything pen to paper. I don't leave any place without a sketchbook. And I think, like Rahul said, he's sometimes little old school. I think I'm very old school in the sense that, design is for me a very tactile, very hands-on thing. And every time we come up with a new project, there'll be many people who will be computer literate, they'll be literate on the latest softwares, but those are all things that keep evolving. I think the core vision of design is something for me very tactile. It's pen to paper, it's making models by hand. And we in our own studio try and preserve that skill. Because there's a science of design, there's a technology of design, and then there is the soul of design, which comes really through this tactile process.
Yeah, and I must add, like, when it comes to sort of design, and art and stuff, I use every material. Like, I love pen and paper, I love that tactile feel, but I also sketch and design in virtual reality. So for me, there's this whole process of discovery and joy that comes when you're actually using new mediums to create the same expression.
That's the true merger.
Yeah, that's the fun part of it.
Yeah, I think we all do that. And I also constantly tell my young students that, yeah, dimag se socho pehle. Don't start, Google Mata is not going to run away. I mean, she's there. But start thinking, be original. And then come down to doing whatever it is. Do your little pen and paper gig and then get on to the Google Mata situation. And as Amit said, I still draw, I still doodle, I do all this kind of thing. And I'm sure Satish does too. I don't know, Dheerajji, do you do that?
No, in fact, for me, it's even different. I have to use a 4B and above to sketch. Hands just move smoothly. And try it. Let's say your friend's number. How many of you remember the telephone numbers? You punched it into the phone, but if you've actually written down in a notebook, you'll remember the number. So for me, it's the minute I've drawn something, my neurons connect. And yes, real old school, but nothing like sketching.
I'm also very old school in that, I also prefer, sketching and, going that way. The great thing which I have observed about, there are a couple of, you can say categories of designer: good designer, great designer, and fantastic designer. So I tier them fantastic as the best one. So they are the one who always approach a problem with zero. They never go with a baggage of a lot of knowledge. They don't go with preconceived notion. Because I think if we look at the first few modules that you learn, there is a whole lot of de-learning that is embedded in that. And that kinds of mellows down you as a person. And that is, I think when Lolita says that, you should not go to Google as the first response whenever you get a problem, because I think then you are conditioning yourself. So first, I think engage yourself, make your experience in whatever design context little more tactile, deal with processes and materials around you, deal with the practitioners. You will learn a lot from the people who have been doing whatever skill that you want to apply in whatever context, whether it is AI or whether it is, pottery, with the practitioners. So that's the most important thing. So I would, always be in a space where I want to go to somebody who knows a skill part of it at a better level and interact with them, sit with them, have a lot of informal, chat and session with them, because they give you a lot of understanding which comes from years of experience. So that is something which I, follow that as my way of working.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely right. I mean, there is some value to the gray hair. And other than getting me into the airport line because I say I'm a senior citizen, I find that it does command some amount of respect somewhere, and experience is very important. And we like to share that experience with you. I think now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everybody to just share an experience, a memorable experience, which might help you look into the future as being, interesting designers or creative designers or more creative designers. So I'm going to ask Amit to recall something which is a memorable experience which might help you look at the way the world is. And then I'm going to ask everybody just a short thing, and then we are going to open it for some question and answers. And let's hope we have some interesting questions.
Thank you. So looking back at how we've evolved as creative professionals, I mean, 2-3 things stand out, and I think one interesting happy accident of fate that happened to us is that we decided to call ourselves industrial designers because that's what we'd studied at NID. What we didn't realize was the power of unintended consequences. A lot of people who did not know in the mid-90s what industrial design was thought we would design industries for them. And, so maybe make factories that make products and not just design products. And a few of these people landed up to our door and said that, we've got some machine tools to manufacture, but we want a factory to make them in. And since we've not found an industrial design professional before, I'm sure you can help us. And we said yes to those people. And we, for a few years, actually designed a whole lot of industries and factories, basically. But we used principles of industrial design to, work at that scale. And today, I'm happy to say that our firm has architects, we've got engineers, we've got industrial designers, and all sorts of other designers. And we continue to design things at all sorts of scales. We've designed a stadium a few years back. But the core design process has never changed. It's all very people-centric, and that's really how we see the world. But, sometimes a definition or a misnomer can lead to happy accidents of fate, and those are the accidents that actually make life more interesting and take you off the track that you'd set for yourself. And as a result of that, now we are quite scale agnostic. We can do small things, things at product scale, and we can do things at much larger scale, and we've learned to bring in all the professionals who we need to do things in that manner all together. So it's also taught us how to work with very diverse skill sets and make them sort of align to a common goal. So, it didn't happen by intent. It happened completely by a, quirk of fate, but it led to some very interesting possibilities. Thank you.
Thanks, Amit. I'm going to ask Rahul now to recall something which is a memorable experience in your design world, and we'll go down the path.
Got it. I thought we were going sequentially. Okay. I'll start with a confession. I think I'm a bit of a pyromaniac. I like blowing things up, right? And a lot of the work we do is with virtual reality simulators for defense and for, like the latest project, the last project we just finished was the training simulators for the astronauts who are going up on the Gaganyaan mission for ISRO. And for me, the thing is, they were like, what's the use of these kind of things? And I was like, man, a virtual reality simulator can simulate things that are not possible even, of course, not in reality, but even in, even a conventional simulator can't handle. So I can blow your rocket up, on the launch pad and then get your astronauts to figure out what to do to save themselves. Or if it's Indian Oil, for instance, who another one of our clients, I got to blow up their entire refinery to give their people training on how to actually put out the fires and stuff like that. So it's just like hilarious that this whole thing that I've had since I was a kid of blowing things up and making things explode somehow got translated, into a lot of my work. And every time we have a project that has this kind of simulation happening, there's this little child inside me saying, ha ha ha, I'm going to blow things up again. So yeah, slightly different, but.
I think there's a child in all of us. So I'm going to ask, therefore, Dr. Sushil Chandra again, Sushil Chandra ji, I'm going to take you back to when you first started your role as this scientist that you must have been at some point, 25, I'm sure. So what are your earlier memories of when you began this whole story of looking at science and your area of work and where you think it was going to take you?
Truly, for me, it is kind of an unanswerable question, but I'll try. Because I'm still exploring what to do next. Let me share the last my journey, which I'm working in the field of cognition, VR, and experience together. If you ask me 15 years before, I was not knowing anything related to cognition. I was not knowing C of cognition. So that was my journey. But because I was more inclined to our brothers and sisters who are differently abled, but my salary is paid from defense. So I have to work for defense. So I tried to find out where this merge of journey can take place. So then I started working on cognitive enhancement for soldiers, but in back of my mind was to work for cognitive rehabilitation for my friends who are suffering from autistic spectrum disorders or attention deficit disorders or attention deficit hyperactivity disorders. And I'm proud to share that the same kinds of virtual world are such a nice way it is designed. I will say in two parts answer. One for differently abled, and one of my students, she has finished a PhD with us in DRDO, but now she is doing postdoctoral, which is almost in a finishing stage, from IIT Delhi and in Department of Design. But what she learned with us, virtual reality and neurocognition together, she's applying for learning outcomes of school children based on this COVID problems, how they are learning in virtual environments. So the application of these things are enormous. Thank you.
Thank you. That's quite amazing, and I think that's very relevant to the times that we also live in. It's really, really. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask just a couple of questions, then we're going to open it out to question answers. I'm not going to talk about my memories because there are too many, and I can see some students I know, and they must have heard these stories many times. So I'm going to ask Satish to talk a little bit about his first couple, his memorable experiences as a designer, as a person. What would you say has been an interesting time?
Okay. I took my first job in 1985 and yes, designed the rear engine rickshaw for Bajaj Auto, started the design studio. After quitting with them in 1988, I started design directions, and you'll be surprised, nobody wanted design then. So for first 7-8 months, luckily my wife is a graphic designer, so the kind of work she did, people understood logo, brand identity, corporate identity, we could survive. So initially we started doing proactive work, think of a machine tool or think of a genset, make it look good, easy to manufacture, and go walk into the client's door and say, okay, this is your product, this is what it can look like. We were shown the door. I met the same client after 18 years in a fair in Germany, and he somehow recognized me. He said, oh, you had come with some ideas, now we're nowhere. So can you actually help us? So I think we've had these experiences, but I still want to narrate a very embarrassing. So as designers, you end up facing a lot of different kind of experiences. So this is very embarrassing, but we were working with an embryologist. You know what an embryologist does, right? So couples who can't conceive, they actually go and. So we were designing a cryogenic cooler to, store the semen. So I walked in for the first time in the clinic, and there was these all young couples sitting in the waiting room, a white-haired guy coming there, and the receptionist hands me a dabbi in my hand. I'm sure you've seen Ayushmann Khurrana's movie, and it was the most embarrassing moment in my life, and I just can't get over that. But, you have to face it. So I was very proud and walked into the doctor's cabin then. I mean, yes, we did the cryogenic cooler as well eventually.
Thank you, Satish. And since you are talking about this, I think I should also share a very interesting memory at the beginning of my career. So for those of you who don't know, I studied exhibition design at NID, and I was actually the first batch that studied exhibition design. And so when I graduated and I went to work as an exhibition designer, there were no women exhibition designers. And we got an assignment at the trade fair, which is a very large space in Delhi, where all the international trade fairs and exhibitions used to take place. So we were working there on a project, and in the evening at around 6:30, I wanted to use the washroom. So when I went to look for the washroom, I found that all the women's washrooms were closed. Why? Because they didn't expect any women to be working in this area. And I had to go through a whole rigmarole and process, a very bureaucratic process, unfortunately, of writing endless letters. Those days with pen on paper, there were no emails, there was nothing. Knocking at the door of the bureaucrat every day, भाई साहब, ladies का loo please खोल दीजिए, please खोल दीजिए. अच्छा मैडम आप यहाँ क्या कर रहे हैं? I said मुझे washroom जाना है 6 बजे के बाद. So they said okay. Then after a week, one washroom in a space of thousands and thousands of square feet was opened. So if I was working at one end somewhere, I had to walk at least half a kilometer to use the washroom. Now times have changed and women have become more empowered, and I'm really happy for that, and I hope it continues and we have a lot of women designers over here. Thank you. And I'm now going to ask Dheeraj to share an experience which he would like to share.
Again, the problem is so many. Yeah. But since I think we are talking about a lot of weird experiences, so I will pick one from my student days. So we used to have a course which sensitizes us towards the craft sensibilities and communities. So I, with my 3 batchmates, had to go to Bastar and Jagdalpur. It was in early 90s. And then there was a block development officer. He was coordinating some of our visits to certain, craft areas and craft communities. So then suddenly there was a river, which I had to, drive a scooter with 2 girls on my back. And there was a small, very narrow wall, probably I think 9 inches or something like that. So even after, I had an experience of driving two-wheeler for a couple of years, but that was like a real test. So when I came back in the evening, so I asked this guy, I said, yaar, koi aur rasta bata dete? We would have, slipped and probably fractured ourselves and all that. So he just said one thing, and which made my entire, learning so profound. He said, inconvenience is memory. And he showed me the board which he had on his back, where it was written very prominently also. And before that, I didn't notice. And I really, I think that particular experience kind of gave me a lot of learning opportunity and a perspective to learning. That the kind of issues and challenges these, remote location people are facing. And I think 5-6 years down the line, I pledged that at least, once in a year or twice in a year, as per the time availability, I will do some service to those kind of communities. So I had been doing it. So sometimes a weird experience really can give you perspective, and that is what happens in design education.
That was very nicely put, Dr. Dheeraj. And now we'd like to open the session to question answers. Guys, we have three really, really, high-end designers with us, two people with, gray-haired experience. And, of course, there's me here as well. But we'd like you to ask engaging questions that are relevant to you as youngsters, which we would love to shed some light on or, just discuss and talk about. So please, can we have a show of hands, please? Okay. Right there, yeah, I'll come to you. Right there at the back, there's a hand going up. We'll start with the back and come onto the front. So students, please be ready to ask some engaging questions.
Hello. So talking about the Facebook Metaverse, they are doing a lot of marketing to make a monopoly in the industry of Metaverse. Hello, is it audible? Facebook is doing a lot of, they are trying to create a monopoly in the Metaverse. But if we talk about gaming industry, a lot of Metaverse actually exists, a lot of world actually exists. So what do you think is going to be decentralized? Is it going to be like a world with different portals in which we can travel? Or is it going to be Metaverse only, like with Facebook?
Can you be a little more
Yeah, I
clear?
couldn't hear you. Just could you put the mic a little closer and...
Now is it better?
Yeah.
So basically, if we talk about Facebook, Facebook has a monopoly in Metaverse. They're trying to create a monopoly. But if we talk about the gaming world, they have a lot of virtual worlds that already exist. So which one of the sides is going to work? Is it going to be a decentralized system in which we can kind of jump from one world to another? Or is it going to be one single thing that is going to dominate the whole thing?
Interesting. Very interesting question. First off, I'd recommend that you read this book called Snow Crash by a gentleman called Neil Stephenson. This is literally the book where the word metaverse was invented, right? Now, Facebook will try and get a monopoly on everything social, right? But the metaverse itself is not really limited to any one company or any one sort of entity. It cannot be by its own very definition, right? So eventually what I foresee is that the metaverse is going to evolve just like the internet did. The internet by its own definition is very decentralized. You cannot sort of blame any one entity for it. Let's put it that way, right? As more and more companies, now it's not just Meta or Facebook, Meta, who are making metaverses. There are plenty. All the large tech companies like your Google and Microsoft and all, they're already putting billions of dollars into actually seeing how this interoperable metaverse would actually function, right? Because what they're saying is that the metaverse is going to be what's the next evolution of the internet, right? So in that evolution, there has to be decentralization. You can't have 2 or 3 companies just sort of taking over the entire space and saying, yeah, this is this is our version. Secondly, and this could be a 1-hour question and answer session, no kidding. I have big issues about the way Zuckerberg is actually projecting his metaverse, yes, right? Don't blame him. I mean, it's the way Facebook operates, right? But I do genuinely believe that once the metaverse evolves into what it is supposed to be, it will be a decentralized entity, which is just a 3-dimensional extension of the internet.
Got it, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Can we have more questions, please? Yes. I'll come to you, Jaya. Please.
Up in front.
Yeah, you. Yeah. Can we have a mic here, please?
Here, catch.
Questions from that side? Yes, I'm coming.
So first of all, thank you all the panelists for giving your time and sharing your experiences. So this is coming on behalf of the students, and very simple question. And this is about design competitions. And just particularly to Satish sir. So there, as we understand, the first experience we get as a student, real brief to work on, is through design competitions. Probably design competitions, unlike one Lexus design. So what is that process we should follow? Only the thing that we have is the intuition to doing that. But we don't know how to do that. So for an example, we have to design the pedestal for a water tank. But how to approach that problem is the question from the student side.
Actually, the answer could be common irrespective whether you're applying for a competition or not. So, one is, I think it's important to apply for competitions because you know that there is competition, and unless there's competition, you'll never improve. So that's one of the reasons why we actually apply for various design awards, to know where you stand. But, because when you're applying, you don't know what the other competitors are doing. So you have to do your best. Your design has to be true to what your intent is and who your target customer is. I think that's important. But we normally don't participate just so that there's an award or something. The culture of applying itself, it's like in sports, whether winning or losing, the spirit is to play. It's the same thing for design competition. The spirit is to apply, and that's when you actually get to learn what your other competitors are doing. And I would encourage there are a lot of student design awards happening globally now. So you should just keep your eyes and ears open, and there's amazing stuff happening now. And okay, now the recognition in terms of monetary gains also for students is quite a lot. There are lots of scholarships. I think Yanko Design has some scholarships, and a whole lot of competitions are there for. In fact, ADI, we have something called the Battle of Projects. So your final year projects you can actually submit if it's worthy, and obviously in consultation with your faculty members. And there is amazing stuff which is happening, and there are 2 or 3 projects which have got commercialized because they participated in the Pune Design Festival's battle of projects. But keep your eyes and ears open. There's lots of competitions around. Where to begin so where do I begin now? So I think identifying the problem. So that is the only thing you start with. Look around everywhere. So when I'm at the airport, I don't sit and read a book. I actually observe how people are walking, how they're lifting their bags. Just keep observing. Unless you observe, unless you question, you'll not know what the problem is.
I think, Satya, he also means, where do you begin looking for competitions? No. Where do you approach? How do you approach? Okay, so I think Amit's got a perspective, so let's hear it from him.
I think like Satish said, you approach a design competition exactly like you would approach any design project. So you make it as realistic in terms of process as possible. And like Satish said, I would sort of reinforce that point. Start with a problem that people haven't articulated well enough and convert it into an opportunity. That's what design is supposed to do. And try and see it in the most open-ended way as possible, because the number of possibilities expand when you do that. Taking off from this whole idea of competitions, I think right now a lot is happening on the internet. If you want to benchmark yourself as a student or a teacher of design, you want to know, are my students doing things that are world-class? I don't mean in terms of output, but in terms of thinking, in terms of process, how they present, how they go from one step to the other. It's quite easy to do that because there's so much of design work, both professional and educational, and of course research work as well, which is available online. If you cut back 25, 28 years back when, folks like Rahul and I graduated, we had no clue what people in other parts of India were doing, let alone other parts of the world. And if we didn't take part in a competition, and in those days, going into a competition meant making panels. You know, you had to roll them up and you had to go through a very expensive process. We had to borrow money to put it into a paper tube and send it to whichever part of the world the competition was happening in. And if you didn't do that, you won't even have a clue whether you are even borderline close to what's happening anywhere else in the world. So in our era, a competition was a way to benchmark ourselves with other people in the world and see, are we even good enough? Because we had no clue. We were in this very remote place called India. Even within India, there was not much design happening. We didn't know what a lot of our peers and seniors were doing because there was no media to disseminate the output of design. And NID those days was the place where all the publication of design would happen. And that itself was very sparse. You would see the same thing every year. So I think if you cut to the present, you have an overdose of design. And to be able to shine with a new idea in this overdose of design is the true strength of a new idea. It's very difficult to come up with something new anymore because everything's been done to some extent. So I think the challenge for design is now a problem of plenty in a way. And I think you have to raise the game to be able to compete in this environment.
I'll just add one more. I'll just give a hint. If you're applying for a competition, if you're just creating a Me Too product, just forget it. Unless there's uniqueness in the product, don't even submit. Because, we've also been on the other side of being jury members for a lot of design competitions. Most jury members, if it's a Me Too product, they'll not even look at the products. So unless there's uniqueness in your idea, don't submit, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think the thing of originality, what I talked about also earlier, that really applies. You know, the uniqueness or the original thought process that creative people go through, and I think everybody does. Never be scared to explore that or bring that out in whichever way you think is going to be interesting. So I saw some hands over there at the back. Can you please put up your hands again so that we can take it? Yes. There's someone. We'll come back to Jaya. Sorry, Jaya, I'll come back to you. There's a young student there, please. And another thing, it would be interesting to ask, especially the ones sitting at the back, how many of you would actually like to be sitting where we are sitting? No one? Some hands are going up. More hands? Yeah? Would you like to be sitting where we are sitting? Great. So to do that, you've got to ask a lot of questions. Yes, please, carry on.
Sir, so my question was currently due to years of innovation, we already have a lot of products which are already invented and which already have a specific manufacturing process, right? So, I mean, in the future, if I get an opportunity to design such a product, for example, a watch or a water bottle, what approach should I take to add value to the product so that it does not become common that so that that product would actually make a difference not only socially and economically, but also as sustainable.
That's interesting, and I think both Satish and Amit can fight for the mic, but maybe both can answer.
Thank you. So I think there are many kinds of design, and not everybody has to do all kinds of design all the time. But broadly speaking, you can do incremental design. So watches exist, cars exist, toasters exist, and all sorts of appliances exist, and you can work on making them better. And of course, the people who are manufacturing these products, the brands that are selling and marketing these products also have to do something beyond the obvious. So very often the designer is at the mercy of the brief, of the design brief. If the brief is to do something incremental, which is not to go too far, just go a little step forward, then that is what you will have to do. It is a limiting brief. But if you really want to set your creativity free, then you have to make your own design brief. And then you have to define the product or the function that you are trying to address in the most open-ended way. So it will no longer be a watch. It will be a way to know the time. Then you will ask, do I even need to know the time? Can I just look at the sky and figure out what time it is? How much precision do I need? So when you start asking these philosophical questions about that specific task and seeing it in a larger way, then new opportunities will unfurl and you'll be able to look at them as a creative person. But it's a choice you have to make in terms of how far you want to go from the brief and whether you really want to be in a zone where you create the brief. And that's why a lot of young talent wants to work with startups, because they are people who are in the process of creating a new brief. And the question you are asking, even they are asking, how do I change the world? Yes. And therefore you will be in a zone where you may do something that you are not prepared to do, but you will be given an opportunity to do things which nobody else has done. And that is how progress happens. When you do things which others haven't done and you are happy being in that zone. So when people look for jobs, they choose jobs across this spectrum. Some people work in the known domain, some people work in the unknown domain, and some people do a little bit of both.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Understood.
Satish, would you like to add to that a little bit?
Amit has almost said everything which is absolutely important. So one is sticking to the design brief, because eventually you have to meet your ends, right? You have to earn. So normally what we would do, we'll say, okay, this is your design brief, this is what we'll deliver. But if we deliver something which you don't want, which you have not asked for, but it's going to benefit with you, so we have a different proposal for the same. And we invariably end up giving them something which we think should be correct. It takes time for the clients to digest. I mean, you talked about water bottles. A bottle is a bottle, but the amount of work which is happening, there are designers across the world just designing bottles. And you'll be surprised, within 3 months, you're going to see 100% a water bottle made in paper. Did you dream of it?
No.
A paper is something which is going to dissolve. It's got no lining inside, but it's going to be a paper bottle. So, he's talking of the environment and all that. And the client had come to that company only to design a bottle. Eventually, he's giving them something else. See, what is a bottle? You have to understand the function of a bottle is to store water, carry it, or whatever. So you have to define whether it's going to be a static place, is it going to be a 20-liter kind of thing? I mean, there was a time who dreamt that we're going to drink out of PET bottles? It was alien for us then. It's become a habit right now, yeah. So people, for example, after this PET bottle is over, there are bottles which collapse now. So you carry an empty bottle which takes less space. So there's tremendous opportunity just to design a water bottle. And I'm telling you, given opportunity, you can design about 20 bottles. The function is to carry and retain water and drink out of it. I mean,
Yes.
can a bottle chill itself? Or can a bottle heat? So bottle is just a word, but you can put different functions to it.
Yeah, we had question.
Thank
Yeah,
you, sir.
please. Yes, coming.
Hello, am I audible? Yeah. Hi everyone, it was a great discussion. So my question is that, so you said that problem is the enemy, it should be short, right? So my question to you is, why is it an enemy? Can it not be an opportunity? Because one direction towards solving that problem is empathy, right? So if it is an enemy, will we be able to empathize correctly? So that is my question. I wanted to understand why enemy? Why is the problem an enemy?
No, so what I meant is identifying the enemy is important. It's not the enemy, it's identifying who's your enemy. So you have to identify that, okay, if this product is launched, who's not going to like the product? So identifying the enemy is important, so I'm not directly saying he's the enemy, but...
Okay, yeah, because the first step is empathizing. So
I think it's in a metaphoric sort of way.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Yes, Rahul, yeah.
There were basically two things. First, I need to thank Amit and Dr. Sushil Chandra for outlining interdisciplinary teamwork, because inside design institutions which were set up primarily through disciplines, so when we set up a design school, we say, okay, we begin with fashion design, visual communication, industrial design, add this department, add that department. So the pillars are based on disciplines. And I think the experiences from the field over the last 10 to 15 years have told us that we have to think outside the disciplines, and that's the only way to work. And while Amit was talking, it struck me that are we looking at a period where the modernist definition of a designer as the author, is changing into a contemporary definition of a designer as a team player. And between the author and the team player, the identity of the designer is kind of stuck. That was a comment question. Then the second thing, which is I really find disturbing, is that when we're talking about the metaverse or we're talking about AI, any kind of future technology, we hardly talk about the human factor. We hardly talk about ethics. So I was reading a news item where a woman felt gang raped in a metaverse experience, and the trauma that she carried back was physical. That reminded me of the movie Matrix, and that question, that if we die in a metaverse, if I'm murdered in metaverse, will I, because it is phygital, it is not digital. Because it is phygital, that thing, if I die in the metaverse, will I be alive in the real life? So yeah, two questions.
So Rahul, I think you're addressing it to your counterpart, Rahul, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, see, this is the thing here, it is a big issue with these kind of, like you said, physical and digital experiences. And it's not new, I've been on this virtual world called Second Life since 2005, right? And my God, if you think that one meta incident was not the norm, it's, Second Life has a full adult component, right? Now, the thing is, with any new platform, there has to be a period where people are getting used to it, where people are defining the rules within which it should actually function. And this, for something like the metaverse, is still currently happening, right? The second thing you asked about dying in the metaverse, well, the thing is that, look, all of us have a digital identity now, which is rapidly becoming very, very close to our physical identity, almost pretty much the same. Right? Now, whether you can actually die in the digital world is a subject of huge debate, because as long as your digital identity is around in some form or the other, it still will exist, right? That being said, there are ways that, for instance, it's a really crazy thing. Facebook also owns this platform called Oculus, which has all these virtual reality headsets and all. Right? And in earlier times, I couldn't give a damn about my Facebook, identity, because heck, I'm hardly on Facebook at all. Right? But now I'm in a virtual world and I bought 20, 30 games. I've spent $2,000-$3,000 on games inside my Oculus headset. If Facebook bans my Oculus identity for any reason, I am screwed. Right? All that money, all that time, all that game, all those things are gone. So these are issues that are now part of the new sort of dialogues that we will have to create around interpersonal interaction within a shared space, right? Nobody has the answers yet, not even Mr. Zuckerberg or not even Mr. Satya Nadella, But it is something that is, you see, because all this is now becoming decentralized. Now this is something that will become a matter of consensus, right? That if enough people in that decentralized metaverse come to an understanding that this is not on, they will build protocols to make sure that it doesn't happen. So these kind of things are evolving as we speak, and I do find it fascinating to watch them evolve the way they have. So, hope that answers the question.
Thank you. I think we have to now close, and before we close, I'd like to thank, of course, all my esteemed panelists for being with us this afternoon, and for all of you for being very patient. We would have loved the session to continue, but we have a grand finale after this, for which I'd request you to all stay back. And I would now like, on the behalf of UID, which is our design school, to present a small memento to all my panelists, and I would request one of my young faculty members, Obrujit, to please come and do the honors for that. And after that, I'll have to ask whoever it is giving the vote of thanks, and we will then call it a day. Yes, and these mementos have been designed by our design school alumni, and it's a very interesting collaboration between visual communication and product design. So that's what we look at in the future, in the virtual world, in the real world, in whichever world. How do we collaborate, and therefore, what is it that we can achieve? So it's all out there, just grab it. So there's been a lot of appreciation for the little gift. Thank you so much. And thank you, all of you. And Preeti, over to you. Thank you.
Check. Okay, so I'd like to now call for the word of thanks, as Lolita ma'am said, whoever it is, or also known as Harish Shankar sir. Talia, guys, that's an amazing faculty member.
Wonderful panel, enlightening discussions. Everything is about good design. All of us strive towards good design. Thank you very much for the world that you've designed for us. Thank you for choosing design in the first place, choosing an ID. I think there was only school that was there at that time. Thanks for designing a lot of interesting products in the present world. And this thanks comes from the future generation who will be designing, predominantly in the virtual space, hopefully. We are the generation in front who's stuck, who will be designing also for the present physical world, for the mixed reality world, and probably also for the virtual world. Thank you so very much for the world that you've created.
Thank you, everybody. Dear panelists, thank you so much. ADW, can you please help escort the panelists down? Thank you, each and every one of you. Ladies and gentlemen, do stay with us. We're going to start the closing ceremony in a bit. And of course, after that is the much awaited